we're back to Working Wonders. We're now doing our highlight with Moulsari Jain. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having
it's
me.
actually quite a special one because we know each other, so there's a little bit of a history there. And I've always had this admiration for everything that you do, particularly from an artistic point of view. I think you're very bound-breaking, and so I just wanted to have to say that. So welcome, thank you for being here. Moulsari, social innovation artist. What does that mean?
For me, it's a term I invented out of a struggle of figuring out how I wanted to explain what I do or what I'm committed to doing, and that is challenging the way that we understand how to interact with each other. So for me, the social part is the interaction of people. The innovation part is the challenging of those norms and unspoken rules. And for me personally, artist brings me a space of openness and a space where subjectivity may rule.
Yeah, and you also said during the conversation at the table with our two other guests that for you it was important, like you started out being a designer, and that as a designer you're more in a place of designing the answers, and that from an artistic point of view, in an artist position, you're actually more in a position of
asking
building questions. I was just thinking, you said asking questions indeed, but I was thinking, but maybe you're actually building questions. You're literally helping, because that's what you say as well on your website, is you help others ask questions.
Yeah.
How do you go about that for people who don't know?
Well, what I tend to do is understand where someone is, or create some level of understanding of where they are. And I kind of look for the doorway, the little crack in the doorway that most people have a little space that they're hoping, waiting, maybe unconsciously, that someone opens it a little bit. And it creates space for possibility, opportunity, things that haven't been explored yet. And often I find that that's much easier done together with someone. So how I see my role is actually holding space for someone else's uncertainty. Because when you open that kind of a door that you haven't explored yet, there's a little bit of fear, there's a little bit of courage needed. And I've been down those rabbit holes a lot. I'm in one every week probably. And so I find it the most generous gift that I can give to sort of help someone, lend them a little bit of courage, I guess, and reassure them that, look, I've been here, you're going to be fine, come with me, come, just dive into it a little bit. And most of the time, I think people find gold at the bottom of those rabbit holes.
I'm sure. I mean, one of the things that you say is really interesting with regard to finding courage, but then there's, that's a sense, that's a feeling, that's a state of being, but then there's the how. And I understand creativity to actually have the ability to make combinations. Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing that you try to do is actually have the conversation about what combinations have you been making in your life. Yeah. You mentioned a quote, how long, how are the current stories that you know still serving you? Mm-hmm. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Sort of how do you then go into that conversation? How do you as an artist who's inherently creative, who's inherently busying themselves with making combinations, how do you do that?
It changes all the time for me, and that's part of my fun. So sometimes it might be a talk, sometimes it might be a workshop, it could be an intervention, an installation, it could be in the public space, and it could also be one-on-one in a coaching kind of relationship. But ultimately, I guess, something that actually you've said a little bit earlier, it's about creating a conversation. It's about creating an exchange. So it's not just about, creating the space, but actually allowing, even inviting the energy to move through that space between us, right? And us can be this us, but it can also be this us, right? The larger us. And for me, part of the creative process now is actually about finding the form that fits the best with the people I'm trying to engage.
Okay, and then tying that back to courage, because one of the things that I also admire about you, and this is becoming very much an admiration, but I don't care, because because I think you're one of the very few people who put into that equation and combination, and hence you're saying courage is mental health. And there's a lot of big thinkers out there who've been through very challenging mental health situations, and so I really wanted to give you some space to talk about that. Why is mental health so important in creation?
Anna-Marie, honestly, for the first 80% of my life until now, my mind was the one source of stability and security. I was always, complimented for my intellect, my intellectual capacity, and I trusted in that. Until I got to a point where once again I was in a depression, and finally I said, okay, you know what, time to unpack this. And I dove into it, and I had to really question this asset that I had relied on all my life. It was the source of my confidence, my courage, my creativity. All the things I've ever done came from this sense of confidence that I can always rely on myself to figure it out. And then there I was in a situation where I wasn't sure what I could believe. I wasn't sure my brain wasn't playing tricks on me. So for me, mental health is actually been the source of asking questions, of becoming comfortable in not knowing. Because mental health and, the whole realm of psychology, psychiatry, mental illness, all these words and terms, they're so misleading at times. They're all created with very good intentions, but language matters. And a lot of the people who create this kind of language, from the world of branding and marketing, how you present things really makes a difference because we create our identities around that. And in my past work as a designer, I was actually helping people create branding and identity. So it brought so much into question. And for me now, mental health is more about having this space in our society, in our interactions and relationships, to not know, to sort of accept for ourselves, but also to each other, that I might seem strong and I might seem smart and I might seem like I have it all together. And I do, but I also really don't. I fall apart like everyone else. And I think that and maybe even worse than other people sometimes. And I think the reason I talk about it is because I wish someone had told me that that was okay. And maybe I would have been less isolated in my journey, which has been solo for such a large part of it, if I felt safe knowing that this is okay. And I still have to teach myself that this is okay almost every single day.
Is this also why you teach the doing nothing? Because doing nothing for so many people is so uncomfortable.
Yeah. For me, so since the first lockdown happened, I actually kind of dropped the doing nothing thing, not because I don't believe in it, but because I was not trying to create pressure for people to do nothing on their own, isolated, when they might be coping. For me, it was really about doing nothing together, to actually innovate the way our culture works, where, that we can all sit together and just do nothing and feel the connection between us without having to prove ourselves, tell each other about our achievements, sound smart, be beautiful, right? Like, we don't have to constantly contribute actively. But we live in a society where most of us have been taught that that's the only way you're going to be valued. So for me, doing nothing was actually, to a large degree, about creating a socially acceptable culture of just being. And in the presence of each other. So when you're in a group of people, maybe they're your colleagues, or maybe you're at a big conference where you're constantly trying to connect with the right people network, and then you're given permission to just sit and do nothing for 10 or 15 minutes. Yes, uncomfortable, but in that space, a lot of people move from discomfort to, wow, this was amazing, to just feel myself in the presence of others, to notice that detail on the wall, to solve a problem that's been bothering me, to just notice how I feel more connected to everyone around me when I'm not talking. And that to me is social innovation.
I think, again, it's awesome. And I think also a great call to action to unfortunately end this conversation, because I could have done this for a very long time with you.
Me too.
So call to action for you guys, just try and do nothing and do it together predominantly. So thank you, Moulsari, and thank you for watching this highlight.